Welcome to Blackbird, episode number 93. My name is James, and today I am pleased to bring to you an interview with Joseph Ecklund of FarmMatch.com, along with the Libertarian Party and a few other things that we might get into. Before we get started, I do have a couple of announcements. So first of all, sorry I'm so behind on uploading to the audio feed. Audio subscribers, I know I've neglected you the last couple of weeks. Work has been super busy. I'm going to try to get those out over the course of the next couple of weeks. I've got a lot of back issues. If you're watching on YouTube or wherever, you can see those live already. Second, I'm going to be traveling the next few weeks, and I'm going to go ahead and just not upload anything. So stay tuned for that. I will probably be back in early June, so that'll be the next episode. And I think that's about it. So without further ado, here is Joseph Ecklund. Joseph, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me on, man.
Yeah, totally. So we obviously know each other through Libertarian Party stuff. And I guess, I don't really want to too much get into that because I think your day job is so much more interesting than politics. So why don't you go ahead and just start by kind of introducing yourself?
Yeah. So my name's Joseph Ecklund. I live out in a small town in Wisconsin, actually outside of town. Like my neighbors are Amish. I live out in the middle of nowhere. And I work with my my friend Max Kane, who started this company, FarmMatch, like 8 years ago. And I think that it's part of the solutions that are fundamental to securing food, farming. The agriculture system is very vulnerable, and it's when we're thinking about political solutions, when we're talking about freedom, one of the things that's super important that sometimes gets left to the back burner is how do you source your food? And when we're looking at the times right now, when we're just past COVID, and we notice how some of these people like Bill Gates have been influencing policy decisions in ways that have been really detrimental to human freedom and health. And you start to notice, oh, wait, Bill Gates, he is the largest owner of farmland in the United States. It's like these problems of centralized solutions to our problems are creating bigger problems. And FarmMatch, what we do is we are working to create a network of independent farmers that have a one-stop platform. So this is like anybody can come onto the platform and find their local farmer, order online, and have it delivered either to a drop location near them or directly to their house. That's how we do things.
I think when a lot of people think about food freedom, like they mainly are thinking raw milk, because that's kind of been the stereotypical food freedom thing. What else is there? What other than getting around regulations, what are the benefits of going with sort of a decentralized approach to agriculture?
Well, and farm freedom, it's really actually about the sustainability for all it when you actually approach the issue properly, it solves all sorts of problems. So there's the political problems of not being able to decide what kind of food you want and having central authorities advise you, and they never do a good job. Look at the food pyramid, which was never scientific and was always pushed by a business interest. But beyond the food freedom question, there are the questions of, is this a sustainable practice, both environmentally and economically? Is this, when you're approaching farming, especially in the United States, because of government and consolidated big business involvement in the agriculture system, and the Federal Reserve causing a whole bunch of disruptions to the finances of farmers, and the quality of the food system, because people want their prices to remain the same, but the resources are shrinking because the Federal Reserve is allowing the financial interests to steal the actual material value, and so farmers have to cut corners in order to keep the prices of the food the same, as the value of the dollar decreases. But when everything became more and more centralized, um, using monocrop agriculture, with chemicals mainly derived from like World War II chemical weapons, uh, the the use of self-sustainable farming practices became sort of outdated, so to speak. And this is when conventional agriculture grew, and the organic movement was sort of a going back on that. It was like, wait, what are we doing here? Let's go back to using animal fertilizer for the land. And one of the issues that has been there is the depletion of the topsoil, the creation of places, with these huge monocrop fields. The ecosystems there, they don't have the microbial activity that creates a healthy environment. The places for nature, birds, animals, to survive and have a well balanced environment have been destroyed. And so when you hear about people talking about wanting to save the environment by going off meat or anything like that, usually they're pushing more of this monocrop agriculture that uses chemicals that deplete the topsoil and basically wear out the resources that we have in the land. And the whole thing is dependent on welfare from the federal government to keep itself going. Most farmers, are on a corporate welfare, or they're going out of business. So all of this is completely unsustainable and detached from reality. And so when you go to independent small farms that are using regenerative practices, they're basically using the resources of nature and the balances of natural processes to create food for their communities. It solves all these problems all at once. And so what we need is to essentially bring the modern conveniences, the technology, the distribution, all these sorts of things to match the old world natural processes. And that way it marries the best of both worlds, because the old world processes are self-sustaining. They actually build the topsoil, they build the environmental base, the microbial layers, the balances that make things really healthy. And you have people like Joel Salatin, who's a great libertarian farmer. He wrote the book, Everything I Want to Do is Illegal. And it's all just about farming and like processing your own animals and selling them off the farm, doing raw milk, all these different processes that are just totally normal and safe to do yourself. The monopolistic or cartelizing business forces in agriculture and agribusiness have really pushed things like processing your own meat, saying, oh, that's unsafe, when really Joel Salatin, I think he was featured in a documentary, Food Inc. He brought in the university lab technicians, and they tested. He was just processing chickens outside, and they found that the surfaces and everything was cleaner than the processing plants with these major central points of failure. And once again, all of this is dependent on federal subsidies to exist. If you just remove the federal subsidies and quit making basically being a natural farmer illegal, the whole thing would self-regulate by the market, by the environmental processes, because you can't do these unsustainable things if you're not basically pumping in a whole bunch of outside things like fertilizers that that are becoming scarce because a lot of them are based in petroleum products and these sort of things that have sustainability issues with regard to geopolitics, basically.
Yeah, I know, or at least I keep hearing that like Russia is the #1 producer of fertilizer. Is that mainly chemical fertilizer, or are they
Yeah.
sending like horse shit everywhere too?
No, no. It's all based on chemical fertilizer, which is, once again, it's an industrial chemical system. They basically make a bunch of nitrogen, um, and they make it from petroleum products. I don't know the chemistry super well, but
Sure.
essentially the 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 effect of this is that it's basically treating it's like treating your body with stimulants as opposed to nutrition. It's like you'll get what you need to a certain extent, but if you're not eating whole foods and instead are eating basically supplement packs, uh, that's not the way your body really works. Your body is healthier when you have a much more complex set of ingredients coming in, and that includes microbes and things. So you're actually going to be healthier if you're interacting with a well-balanced set of microbes as well as a well-balanced set of foods. And modern science, which has basically been this pipe dream of, Walt Disney, Bill Gates, these sorts of people who want to control life itself. They don't really have they think that their ideas are superior to the actual processes, and in so doing, they ignore science that is actually very robust, saying that everything's a lot more complicated than we thought, and these traditional diets, traditional practices were integrating natural processes that made things much more resilient and healthy.
So yeah, it sounds like the same benefits of the body having like a kind of diverse and whole foods diet is it's almost the same with the soil. Like
Yep.
having diverse crops is that's kind of the way to have a sustainable farm. Who did these farmers, so prior to Farm Match, and I'm sure there's other similar um sites and things like that, but prior to the internet and e-commerce, how did these farmers that were running these small farms support themselves and their family financially if agribusiness sort of has that stranglehold on the industry?
Well, I mean, so in ancient times, the cities were never too removed from their surrounding farms. The distribution of farming of food was to their local regions. And what happened, you could probably follow this through the subsidy of the highway system and agribusiness and the farm bill and all these sorts of things. They have standardized and nationalized much of the industry. And you can look at the grocery store. Just go to the grocery store and look at like where the food is coming from. They're from huge centralized processing plants that make it so that there's no accountability for the farms. So you don't know which farm your food is coming from. The processing of the food largely destroys the nutrient value and just creates a fuel source. And you can see a whole bunch of people developing autoimmune and allergy issues growing more and more and more the more they're eating food that doesn't have that a relationship to the soil, essentially, that it's been sterilized. And you can see this with it's a similar thing to the abolition of peanuts from the home. There was a dramatic rise in peanut allergies. If you're going to create a dramatic erasure of microbes from your life, suddenly people are becoming more and more sensitive to things. But interestingly, the reverse happens to be true about some toxic chemicals in our environment, where you're just getting micro exposure more and more and more. Things like chemicals, cleaners, plastics, these things that can mess with our hormones and stuff like that. I mean, you can handle them for a little bit, but our modern society the amount and the persistence of them in our environment creates a lot of health problems. But to get back to your question about how do people get the farms, the food to the people, I mean, they were just in the community. So the farms were never that far away. But what has happened is that through a lot of these government policies, the farms have been essentially, the small farm world has been largely destroyed. So there's the farms that have succeeded have largely been insider interests. They survive off lots of government contracts or government subsidies for creating more wheat, corn, soy, and they follow the USDA policies in order to do that. And it's basically a government subsidized system to consolidate the whole agriculture system. And different business interests have participating in writing those rules because the government doesn't know about how to regulate processing meat or producing wheat or anything like that. So they go to the large agribusiness interests and they say, how do you do this? And how should we standardize it? And so it's those business interests that write the procedures, and anybody who might be perfectly safe but doesn't follow those procedures are selected against. And so because there's subsidies of corn, wheat, and soy, largely because of lobbying for things like the food pyramid and completely erroneous understanding of human nutrition and national programs to make sure that we're feeding everybody a healthy diet of something that's completely unhealthy, it dysregulated the farming system, created these huge farms that supply major food production factories, and then supplied the grocery store systems, and basically reversed what should be cheap versus what should be expensive. If you're going to put a whole bunch of processing into a product, it's probably going to increase its price. But because of the subsidies, it's lowered and made it so that these essentially completely unhealthy foods are very cheap and filled with all sorts of soy and corn products because that's the stuff that's most subsidized. Whereas good whole foods, if you got them locally, right now they're very expensive. So it's a really interesting problem, and it's just another example of how the government gets in and in the spirit of creating a good, just totally disrupts the natural flow of things.
So through FarmMatch, farmers are able to, and consumers. I mean, as a city dweller, I'm much more of a consumer than a farmer. I mean, you can see my little dying herb garden behind me. So this is really a way that we can help local farmers without really having to like drive out to the farm and meet the cow face to face and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and before FarmMatch, there have been some other solutions. A lot of them have been like directories. So you're like, find your local farmer, and you look on a map and you find that. But what we want is to basically completely reset the food system. We want to decentralize the food system. We want it to be as normal for you to get food directly from a farmer as it is for you to go to the grocery store. And so in order to do that, what does that look like? Well, for one, in the modern age, you got to be able to order online. You got to be able to just go online and say, hey, I need chicken, I need milk, I need eggs, I need some produce, and I need to not have to go an hour out of town in order to get it. So how do we do that? And so what FarmMatch does is we work with farms that basically have regular routes. So some people might be familiar with a CSA model, community supported agriculture. What those do is people generally like the usual model would be this is a produce farmer and the community that their customers essentially pay them at a discounted rate for a season's worth of produce, and they would get it delivered every week. And so it's this every week I get a box, and so that's a distribution model. But the CSA is also a funding model, and we'll work with those. But that's a lot of people don't want to get a whole season worth of produce and not have the ability to select what they get, all that sort of stuff. And so but the distribution model is great because the farmer can take management of the distribution, have that direct customer to farmer relationship, which builds trust and accountability on behalf of the farmer. You build a relationship to your food producer, which is really important when we think about securing your food source for potential disruptions, whether it be economic or political. If you have a relationship with somebody who produces food, that's like one of the basics. Like some people like to store food in their basement. I think you should have a relationship with a farmer. That's what I think you should have. Unless it's going to be like there is war and you can't, and the farmer's life is just completely disrupted. Like, I think that's way more, it's better for you. It's going to be way more sustainable because that farmer is going to have food past the, 6 months you might have stores for. But in any case, so with that distribution model, the farmer can take your orders, and basically bring you the food, whatever you want. So our farmers are all independent, so they get to make their own decisions. Some of them have minimum orders. Some of them, go on a weekly basis. Some go on a monthly basis. Some are private memberships. So this is a very libertarian thing. They have pulled themselves out of the public where corporate rules apply, and they bring themselves into private membership associations. So basically, it's a private club. You can join our club, and when you join the private club, then the rules of our house apply, not the rules of the US government or the state government. And this is actually something that, the most common one, is like a private club, a dining club. A private dining club, smoking rules apply to public bars. But if you go to a private dining club, they can have cigars and stuff inside, and nobody bothers them because it's a private organization. It's not open to the public. So these farms will do stuff like that. You sign a little contract saying, hey, I take responsibility for my own health. And then they'll let you order, raw milk and stuff like that, that maybe the government doesn't think you should have, largely because it's actually the best stuff for you.
Yeah, I think that's the coolest part of FarmMatch is I haven't pulled the trigger yet, but the coolest thing about FarmMatch is that like you can order direct from the farm without having to order a 300-pound quarter or eighth whatever of a cow, and because I live in an apartment. I've got a small freezer. I don't have a deep freeze down in the basement or out in the garage. So that's been my main hang up with this sort of thing is the amount of food that I'm able to store at any given time. Then again, as sort of a wannabe prepper, like I would love to have that deep freeze down in my basement. So
yeah, right. I've got a couple freezers.
Yeah, I believe you. Yeah. So according to your LinkedIn, which I stalked you on a little bit, your like educational training is in cybersecurity. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So how did you migrate from that to sort of the opposite of cybersecurity, or do they relate to one another?
Well, I got hired because of my computer interests, because this is a software company. Max was looking for somebody to help with program development, QA testing, that sort of stuff. I happened to be old friends with Max. I was there. He was being persecuted by the state of Wisconsin for having driving raw milk from a farm to some people who wanted to drink it. But then 10 years later, I was looking for a job, and Max wanted somebody to help him work on developing new features and work on promoting FarmMatch. And so I am studied cybersecurity, which is largely working with securing the infrastructure so that your information, your digital assets are secure against outside threats, against potential environmental problems, all sorts of things like that. And I would like to take more of that training into my work at FarmMatch. But at this point, I just love the work that I'm doing, promoting this excellent solution, and the fact that, when I was looking into computer stuff, I was like, okay, I don't like the government. I'm interested in crypto. What do I want to do with my life in my training? And the local college was offering a cybersecurity program, so I was like, hey, that's cool. I can maybe help companies and individuals secure their resources against criminals, public or private.
Okay, cool. So I guess a big question that I have is like, if I'm just like Joe Blow off the street, first of all, how am I finding FarmMatch? I'm guessing, the few hundred people who are going to listen to this isn't going to sustain the business. But then also, like, how do you recommend people who are like, I can go buy ground beef for $4 a pound or whatever it is now. It might be like 11, I think, actually. But is this economically feasible for like your average Joe Blow consumer?
So, I mean, when it comes to that, there's a couple things involved. So, for one, your question is about how are people getting to know this, and second is how accessible is it, say, economically. At this point, it's like the innovators always are pushed a little bit towards the wealthier markets, right? And that includes proper, I would say that these smaller agricultural endeavors have been oriented more towards those niche markets for the foodies, and foodies put their money where their mouth is. And I'm of the philosophy that if you don't pay now, you're going to pay later, because I know lots of people, their life expectancy and their quality of life as they get older, based on whether they eat food like craft foods versus whole foods from a farm. It's, the amount of obesity, diabetes, heart disease, the leading causes of disease and death in the U.S. are oriented around your diet and what kind of food you're eating. And so, it depends on your value and your time preference, whether you want to invest in food that will keep you having a healthy, robust life, or whether you want to maybe save some money and put it towards something else. And then potentially, we're dealing in risk factors, not certainties, but with a higher potentiality having to deal with more health problems in the future. But as far as people getting to know things, I would really like to tell you about the next phase of FarmMatch. So I want to tell you a little bit about FarmMatch, give you the whole spiel.
Yeah, do it.
So,
and real quick, just to
go ahead.
cut in, I will say that at least here in the Twin Cities, I'm guessing the farmers set their own prices. At least here in the Twin Cities, like it's not much more than the grocery store prices, especially right now with the inflation kind of setting in the grocery stores.
Yeah,
it almost feels like the independent farmers are somehow insulated from that a little bit. Is that kind of baked into this?
Well, I think that with independent farmers is that their prices don't move as fast. So what happens with the main meat markets is it's like, charting oil prices. They're changing things daily, on the day to day. The farmers, they're looking at their business in a slower, more long term pattern because they're independent. They're not charting all the prices every day, and so I mean, as their costs rise, they will have to raise prices, but um, it's not the same as. I mean, a big part of the modern grocery store pricing is the distribution costs, and distribution in the US is insane. Distribution of food in the United States is absolutely insane. You look at, I had a meme, and it was pears raised in Indonesia, uh, uh, and then like flown to Brazil for packaging, and then go back to China in order to be processed and then sold in the U.S. Like the food system right now is absolutely insane, as it's dependent on fuel, which is a geopolitical risk factor. Um, it, it it's it's too risky. It's a bad business model, and considering how much it's been consolidated, I think it's a great place to have disruption. And what we want to do is disrupt it in service of human community. Um, and one of the things about FarmMatch is that because it's early and our network is fairly small, you're going to have less competition. But as the network grows, there's going to be more competition, and farmers are going to have a much better price system. Um, so, just to give you a brief insight into how FarmMatch works, um, FarmMatch is a software and web platform for the farms and a marketplace for the customer. So the customer is searching for local food, and they come to farmmatch.com and they put in their zip code and they find farms that serve their area. Now these farms, they work with FarmMatch if they're regenerative. They don't use chemicals or antibiotics and stuff like that. They're basically practicing organic, though we don't require certification because we're libertarians. We think that actually accountability is through the relationship. So we are essentially acting kind of as a certifier. So we start with an honor system. They say they don't use chemicals and they don't use antibiotics and stuff, and then they get customers. We drive them customers through the FarmMatch portal, and the customers are essentially the watchdogs and police of the honor of that food and that farm relationship. And if the farmer does shady stuff, goes back on their word, the customers get wind of it, or somebody gets sick who's a chemically sensitive person and raises the red flags, their whole their access to this platform, their access to a large portion of their customer base likely is at risk. And so that keeps them honest. We offer them all their software, but the big thing that we offer them is risk-free marketing. This is essentially what the grocery stores do. Grocery stores are places for farmers to sell their food, and the farmers are terrible marketers generally. They don't know how to market. They barely know how to, they put a sign on a bulletin board, hoping to sell some calves, hoping to sell some beef, or they go to the farmer's market along with everybody else. So what they really need, the farmers have three things that they really need in order to be successful, independent business people in the modern world. They need to be able to manage taking orders and that sort of stuff. And that's what our website does. It helps them address the needs of the customers that they have. They need to be able to interact with the financial system. So they need to be able to take payments, and doing that through the internet requires things like credit cards and stuff like that. And then beyond that, they need marketing. They need somebody to bring them new customers so that they can do their customer service thing, and they can provide them food and get money, and the cycle goes on. And FarmMatch, we're not professional marketers, we're software people. So how do we solve this problem? Well, we're actually in the midst of the final testing phase of a decentralized affiliate network payout system. And this is actually aimed at people like you. This is aimed at also any food freedom or environmentalist or political freedom activist, but also podcasters, health bloggers, all these sorts of things, where we can connect the people who are the most passionate about the issues that regenerative, local, decentralized agriculture solve. The people who are most passionate about that have been talking about it forever, but there's no financial connection between them and Joe Blow farmer in the sticks. Like, there's no connection there. There's no way for that farmer to pay. Like, say if we got connected with Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan starts pushing regenerative agriculture, which he cares about. He had Joel Salatin on, and he believes in it. He believes in it for environmental, political, and sustainability reasons and health reasons. If he can get paid by each one of these independent regenerative farmers everywhere all over the country, and maybe someday the world, then he's going to dedicate more time to promoting that. And the farmers are actually going to be getting the investment that they need and get the customers that they've desperately been wanting to reach. And so that's what FarmMatch is doing. We've been focused on building the software that can basically handle anything a farmer wants to throw at it, which is very complex because farms are actually very complex. All of them operate a little differently. Their distribution models are crazy. And like I said, some of them are private clubs. Some of them need herd shares. Some of them are open to the public. Some of them are partially open to the public, but have a secret club, all these sorts of things. But now we're going to be completely attacking this marketing system. We're about to basically go gangbusters, and we're looking for more farms. We're looking for people like you who are interested in this as a environmental, nutritional, and political solution. This is essentially the agorism. We do work with the credit card system, and I'd like to get crypto involved, but it has its difficulties. Crypto does not accommodate certain aspects of our software as well as I would like, but that's something that we can totally solve. But yeah, this is something that I think could be as disruptive as anything, because basically when you want to make a major disruption, whether it be business, technological, or political, you need to have the solution invented. So we have the software. We're about to finish the marketing connection, which I think is the real solution. Everything about FarmMatch is going to synergize to be this ultimate solution for independent farms connecting to the wider world. But if nobody knows about it, it's going to die on the vine. So people need to know about it, and even just in a vague way. They know that it exists, just like people know Bitcoin exists, but they don't necessarily, they're not going to do anything about it. It has to take the third aspect, which is the pain point that the solution solves gets bad enough. And so any revolution acts this way. People even if it's a bad solution, if it's been invented and people know about it as the solution to this problem, and the problem gets bad enough, people will all become socialist, and the world will dive off a cliff. But with crypto, as inflation gets worse or the US defaults, people will flood to crypto, and hard monies as the solution, because they know that it exists and it actually solves the problem, or it purports to. So FarmMatch is in this place where the agricultural system, if the federal government doesn't pay for monocrop agriculture, the whole system falls. The whole system's broken. And if we have a solution that allows independent farms who work with fertilizer that they can produce themselves and distribute to their local communities in ways that they can manage independently, can get access to customers without, that is pushed by marketers like you, like, Joe Rogan or whoever, then everybody actually finds integrates into this solution. Everybody benefits and everybody gets, healthy, wealthy, and wise, while the system falls apart around them.
That's great. I think that's kind of the original vision of this show, was to find ways to get around the kind of inevitable collapse, I guess.
Right.
So our friend BJ put up, so she's a new customer of FarmMatch, and for $47 she got like 4 pounds of meat, half a gallon of raw goat's milk, and half a pound of raw cheddar. So and some frozen squash as well.
Yeah, man.
So yeah,
like dinner.
it sounds like a few dinners actually. So
yeah, man,
and great. I know she's she's a single woman, so $47, that's going to go a long way for one person. If you've got a family, it's going to be a little bit more, but still, that it seems really reasonable to me as sort of the sole grocery shopper in my house.
Right, and a lot of that, like, a lot of people develop allergic reactions to milk in the grocery store because it's been ultra pasteurized and homogenized, which disrupts the chemical structure of it. Whereas this raw milk that they have, that is the natural stuff. A lot of people who thought they were allergic to milk will drink raw milk and they'll be fine. And the lactase, it's already got the microbes that are digesting the lactase or the lactose. This stuff, it's like old world solutions that we didn't know we needed. We just created a bunch of problems by accident.
So I'm assuming that, like, if a farmer joins FarmMatch, you're not binding them to some sort of non-compete or anything like that. Like they can also, if FarmMatch the second, launches next week, can farmers join both, kind of like Uber and Lyft?
Yeah, man. We want to provide you so much value. Like, I think that what we will have in our contract is that if we brought you a bunch of customers, that when you leave, you can't just take those customers. Like that would be a violation of the purpose of what we're doing. Sure. But as far as, like, even some of our largest farms, we have a couple farms that ship nationwide for people. We don't have a farm on our network yet, and one of them is, I think, Miller's Organic Farm. It's like a network of Amish farmers that have a administrator, because these guys, they don't use technology, so they have to have somebody else manage their web store and all that sort of stuff. But they don't just list on FarmMatch. They list on I forget what the other one was, but they have somebody else who runs their own Miller's Organic Farm store, and they're working fine on both of them. We're not worried about that. We're worried about actually providing a solution and being the best at it. And that's why we're putting all of our chips on this decentralized affiliate marketing affiliate network, because the big problem that independent farms have is getting new customers, because most of them are doing things like putting up a sign on a bulletin board, because they or they get a website and they pay way too much money, because also we're cheaper for the farmer than any of the other solutions, because we think that we should make all of our money making sure that they're successful, not because we made them a nice website. It's like, when they can end up with a really nice website, but how does anybody find it? If you have a nice website, right, nobody knows about it. you have to have good, like, search optimization, all these sorts of things. You basically have to get a master's in marketing when you're out there trying to manage your crops and your animals. Like, that's not what you're about. Like, so what do they usually do? They usually contract with a marketing company or somebody to build a website and invest a whole bunch of money at high risk to themselves. And then who knows if they're actually going to get any conversion from that? Like, are those clicks? Is that searching? Is that going to end up with food on in your truck to go out? We don't know, but you're going to spend the same amount of money. So what we're doing is, no, if a marketer's worth their salt, they're going to, put out their link or whatever and drive you new customers, and based on their sales, you'll spend. But you can, if they don't have risk, then they're willing to reward marketers healthily, wealth, what's the word?
Handsomely is what you're looking
Handsomely, that's the word. Ah, man.
I know. I was like, wait a second. It's handsomely. Yeah.
Yes. It's handsomely.
So what about scale? Have you guys, I searched my zip code a couple of weeks ago. I think there's like 4 or 5 farms in my area that are offering. A lot of them were sold out of the stuff that I would want to buy. Has that become a problem more and more as more and more consumers are hearing about it and kind of, obviously there's more consumers than there are farmers.
Yeah.
How are y'all handling the scale issue?
I think that the bottleneck is definitely in getting new farms on. And part of that is definitely like us doing our job in notifying the farms, because frankly, like, Max Kane, my boss and my friend, he was just on the high wire with Del Bigtree. We got like dozens of new farms calling us up and getting.
Yeah, you mentioned Rogan earlier. I was like, oh my god, that's gonna put them out of business. Del Bigtree is also another kind of big name, especially in this space. So yeah.
We're actually having an event here next month with Del Bigtree. He's coming to speak. We're also having Joel Salatin and Sally Fallon, the OGs of the health and farm freedom movements, and sort of like this passing of the torch thing. It's the party's called Max Kane's Party. It's a sort of elite event that he's having on his farm, but it's like the OGs. So Sally Fallon, she's the president of the Weston A. Price Foundation, and that's like that's the original like health freedom people, the people who are telling the truth about the messed up dentistry, the depletion of nutrients in farm foods and things like that, and how the food pyramid was all upside down and all that sort of stuff. Like, they were doing that for a long time. And then Joel Salatin, he's the regenerative libertarian farmer, and they're going to be there. And we're also going to have Del Bigtree and others that are moving forward. I want to get Thomas Massey, but he doesn't like leave Kentucky or DC. But I got to see him at the Rogue Food Conference. But anyway, man, I lost my train of thought.
We were talking about scaling.
Okay, yeah. So scaling, we definitely need to do that. But I think it's largely a question of farms don't like to change unless they can see a certain level of certainty.
Right.
And as we have this customer problem, that they will start signing up. Like that's the way I see it, is that farms are a little bit more slow to do these sorts of things. That's why the prices are more stable with these independent farms. They're like, I'm not sure if things have really changed, like I don't know if it's a constitutional thing for people who like to work with the land and work with cows. Like, they just like to move a little bit slower.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, that's it.
But I definitely think that that's going to be an issue. But I think it's a transition issue. And that's the case with every technology. There's going to be instability in the signal with cell phones when they're like this big, and people are paying $3,000 for this phone and it barely works. But I think that we have a few years to get this thing ready for when the federal government is not able to pay monocrop agriculture. Like
Yeah.
I'm worried about that, and I think that this is a way for a lot of people to have to really build that transition. And once that problem really spikes, um, a lot of these farms are going to have seen all these other farms that have made it, that have transitioned successfully, that have followed the steps. Like Joel Salatin has shown that you can use the same amount of land that people say you can produce this much corn on, and and this much soy. You can produce more food using regenerative practices with proper rotation and things than you can using conventional agriculture. It's all a bunch of lies that they've been putting out. You just need to actually treat the land responsibly. So don't over abuse it, and do proper rotation, because that causes the grass to pull more carbon dioxide out of the air and solve climate change and all that. But you can't do it if you're overgrazing. It doesn't work with the plant's production cycle. But these farms are going to see that these systems work, and that the farmers are not keeping 40 cents on the food dollar. They're keeping 80 cents on the food dollar. So we want these farmers to be really economically sustainable. We want the other farms and the upcoming farmers, these people who really love, who I know tons of people who want land and want to do farming, but they have to work a second job in order to just start, because there's so much risk involved in getting started. If we can be basically being ready for them, so that once they've basically got their act together, they've got like 20 households that they've been supporting, so they've done it for like 2 years, then we can take from that 20 to 2 to 500 in the span of a couple years, that they can really, like, they know what they're doing. And then they can ramp up, and they go from that 20 to 120 to 400. Like, they can actually, once they get their systems down, they can grow. But a lot of these farms, they're very reticent to take on new things, and there are other companies that are doing similar things to us that aren't doing the marketing side, but are providing software and these sorts of things. And they charge the farmers a lot, and I'm not sure if many of the farmers get that much of it from it. And that makes me a little irritated. So but I think that the system, yes, it's going to go through pain points, it goes through stress as it grows. But I see that notoriety is a huge factor when it comes to a farmer being able to adopt it. They're like, oh, I've heard about it and I've heard it was successful. When that starts to become normal for them, then there's a major flood of people. And we're already starting to see that.
I feel like there's a lot of so you've so far mentioned like business interests and sustainability and climate change and kind of all of these sort of lefty buzzwords, or at least they were lefty buzzwords up until a few years ago.
Yeah.
On the other hand, farmers tend to be conservative. Obviously you've just kind of been talking about how they're personally conservative, but they're also politically conservative. Do you feel like that this is sort of a bridge building organization or I guess movement, if it's even a movement?
Well, yeah. I mean, so I come from this area of Wisconsin where Organic Valley started. The brand Organic
Is that
Valley?
granola bars?
No, it's like milk and
thinking?
orange juice. You go to
Okay.
the grocery store and you find, I would say
Oh,
most.
I'm thinking of Nature's Own, I think.
Yeah. So
Okay.
Organic Valley, they sell like cheese and milk and stuff. They're basically a large co-op. They span the
Sure.
US. And they started here. And part of what that was this bridge between old dairy farmers that hadn't yet transitioned to conventional. or they just saw that their neighbors were. Like, these are old world. They hadn't yet transitioned. This was in the 70s. And they're like, I'm not sure about this whole idea. And then there were these hippies coming out from the Twin Cities, and they wanted to go hide in the, it's very hilly around here, and you can hide in a little tight valley and grow your pot. And they were interested in organic agriculture. And the fusion of these two movements, or of these very conservative dairymen who'd been living in this area for generations and generations and generations, with these sort of hippies who wanted to, hide in the woods and smoke their pot and grow some food and get back to the land and be very sort of the new left of the time. They formed a co-op together, and it built this bridge. And now we have around here the alternate Hicks, which are like essentially the organic rednecks. And you have people like Joel Salatin, who is both a conservative Christian, but a wacky renegade libertarian,
right?
Who is an environmental activist. These things all come together, and really, like, when I approach the more conservative Christian types, it's like you're treating God's garden with the respect that a reverent person would. Like, we don't just abuse earth. God, this gift from God is actually something that we have responsibility for. And if we have responsibility for it, we just don't exploit it. We actually integrate with it. We honor the magical aspects of nature, and we say, wow, this works really well. And if we can actually almost take nature and understand it well enough to integrate with it properly, then we create an agriculture system that harmonizes with nature and actually creates more health and more robustness. I think it, like, I'm an artist. I write music and stuff. And one of the things about any aspect of human life and nature and art and all these sorts of things is that it's not just doing what I want. If I just do what I want, it can sound really crappy. But if I'm, improvising or I'm writing something, I'm actually trying to hear what is right. And what's right is actually kind of outside of me. It's like I do what I want, and it's like, oh, that sounds crappy. And then I change it a little bit, and it's like, oh, that's what I'm looking for. That's it. Eureka. It's actually this idea. It's a spiritual idea that when we integrate with the whole, we actually reach outside of ourselves, and we create we infuse this true thing with a little bit of what's us, what's myself. And that's what creates my art. When we're talking about agriculture, we take what's the human, we create the garden out of nature. Nature has this beautiful, crazy, almost sometimes cruel, sometimes epic world, and we create a little bit of order, and we integrate the systems a little bit more harmoniously. We take the fertilizer in a more regulated way, and we integrate it. Suddenly the microbes, everything becomes healthier. Everything has the room it needs to grow, and it isn't just struggling. We can make God's earth even more beautiful by understanding all the different parts of it and working with it. But if we just essentially feel very self-interested and narrow our focus too much, we create things like monocrop agriculture, which end up destroying the land and not honoring it, and aren't sustainable in the long run, and we'll pay for it. We'll pay for it sooner or later. And then it's with things like FarmMatch. To me, it feels like Noah. Like, the rains are going to come. It's going to be a flood. We better get ready. Everybody get on FarmMatch.
All right. Well, so that actually is a pretty good segue into sort of the other topic that I wanted to talk to you about. So you're active in like anthroposophy, is that right?
Yeah, I've been immersed in anthroposophy since I was a child. Um,
Wow. Okay.
so, do you know
And
anything about
I
anthroposophy?
so I have read a couple of like pamphlets on theosophy, which is sort of the predecessor to anthroposophy, right?
Yes, yes.
So yeah, can you maybe just kind of describe it? I've only read like the Wikipedia page on
So
anthroposophy.
theosophy was, largely an infusion of Indian philosophy, and it had a large boom in Germany, I guess towards the end of the 19th century, right? And
Yep.
um, Rudolf Steiner was a philosopher, engineer, and clairvoyant who who was brought into the Theosophical Society for a little bit. He wasn't really a member, so to speak, but they had him talk, and he was describing um, essentially the nature of reality, and he actually wrote a book called Theosophy, which might not fully be what the Theosophists like, but I think a lot of them would probably resonate with it. But it's essentially the anatomy of the human being, not from a materialist perspective.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, with to just really briefly go over something like theosophy, it's like, okay, we are physical beings, right? We're made of chemistry in physicality. But if you're just dealing with chemistry with the laws of entropy, you're a corpse and me being alive, there isn't much difference. There's just a certain level of activity that's not there. So there's something qualitative to life that's different. So that's a subtle thing
Mhm.
that might be a little different. Then there's the question of experience, consciousness, like the way animals are conscious. So a rock is different from a plant. A plant is alive, and a dead plant or a rock, they're just chemicals, minerals. Um, an animal has this weird thing called experience, consciousness, that's different from plants. Plants have response systems, and some people think that they're sentient, but it's in much, I would say, at least a sleepy way. And then human beings, um, we have a sort of ego individuality that Steiner talks about being like we each have our own biography. And this biography is like the story of ourselves. And when you think about a story, the idea of that person is as different from the idea of somebody else. Like the idea of Albert Einstein and who he is and his biography, his story, is as different from uh, from Cleopatra's biography and her story. It's as different as a duck is from a chicken. And he's basically saying that a duck and a chicken, they're both birds, they're both living beings, but the idea of them is as different. Like a duck and a chicken, they're they're related, but they're different. They're the species of them are different. And so what he basically said is that we have physicality, we have life, we have experience in our soul is the term that he used, is soul. And then spirit. Spirit is the ideas itself. So spiritual things might be things like rationality, math, goodness, beauty, the the archetype, to almost use a platonic sense, the archetype of a thing. So the archetype of a chicken, the archetype of a duck, the archetype of me, and the archetype of you. Um, and that we each have that individual spirit, that individual idea, because of the nature of our biographies and these sorts of things. And so he basically said that humans are essentially threefold. We have body, soul, and spirit. So that's the physical, the experiential. And it's interesting that the experiential is not the supreme. The supreme is the spirit. So it's like when you have a soul experience, so say hedonistic pleasure, you're trying to avoid pain and gain pleasure. If that is superior to the idea of goodness or honor or uh, or doing what your duty is to those around you, there's something sick. There's something ill about that. That's wrong. We can tell like that. No, that's not right. And I'm sensing something outside of myself, a spiritual concept that no, that's not right. Even though I might want it to be right, I might like it. And that's sort of the one of the first books that he has, Theosophy, and then from there he has a whole book about spiritual activity as the foundation for freedom, or it's basically freedom from that spiritual idea of me being superior to my soul is what gives me freedom, because then I can overcome my likes and dislikes and do what is actually truly true to me. And then it's actually my nature, my truest nature expressing itself in reality. And that's freedom, not in the legal liberty sense, but freedom in the existential sense.
Awesome. So where can people go to find more information on that if they'd like to? Is there like a website other than buying a book?
Well, you could go to rsarchive.org. I think they have like audiobooks of this stuff. You can go to look up the Anthroposophical Society. I don't know. They've been around since the 20s or the turn of the century last.
Yeah.
So over 100 years.
It's kind of one of like, you know, given the era when it was kind of coming about, I'm skeptical of it, I guess. Although you know, Steiner's his Wikipedia page says that he was sort of an anti-Wilsonian, so that's definitely brownie points there.
Yeah, well, no, he said that Wilson was one of the worst beings to incarnate at the time. And
I think we can all agree
we
on
look
that.
we look at that in history, and he was saying it when it was happening, when Wilson was quite popular, that he was essentially helping to birth a kind of a demon. You know, if you're speaking in spiritual terms, people want to put it in like, you know, in sort of materialistic terms. When I talk about a demon, I'm talking about like communism is a demon. Communism is a spiritual entity that destroys the health of humanity. Yeah. And you know, an angel might be a structure that exalts humanity. So something like beauty might we can look at it, we can resonate with it. But you know, Wilson was essentially a tool of a demon birthing just systems of control and hell into life on Earth, and that gives him points in my book too. Yeah, and he was he considered himself an anarchist, but he was first exposed to anarchism through Spooks Man.
Yeah, Max Stirner. I was just about to say it sounds like a spiritualization of Stirner.
Yeah. And he talked about oh man, my words are starting to lose me. I'm getting tired.
We've been going for a while. Your brain's probably getting worn out a little bit.
Yeah, we saved the hardest and most interesting stuff until I'm tired.
It's all right. Cool. Well, I'm a fan of Stirner, so I'm probably a fan of Steiner too. I'm also a fan of sort of the esoteric age that we're entering, which we don't have time to get into, but I've talked about it at length. So it sounds like Steiner's probably up my alley. I'd like to check him out. Trying to think if there's anything else. I'm really looking forward to the affiliate program getting spun up with FarmMatch. Let me know when it does.
Oh, I'll put you on the list.
Okay, awesome. Do you wanna plug your LNC stuff?
Sure. Yeah, Matt. I'm running to represent Region 6, which is the Northern Midwest. I figured, you know,
this is in the Libertarian Party.
Yes.
For my agorist listeners who have no idea what we're talking about and want to turn off the podcast,
Hey, man. Yeah. And I totally respect that. You know, politics isn't for everyone, but we would like your support. What I want to do is I want you to do your market activity, whether you have permission or not. I would like to try and make it so that nobody bothers you. Now, that's one of the reasons why I think we both agree maybe FarmMatch and solutions like this might be in some ways the real foundation. And the
Right.
Libertarian Party stuff is we're trying to make it easier for you to do your thing.
And that's the big thing for me as far as like I left the sort of political side of things a while back, and the Freedom Cell network that BJ is bringing up has done a ton to help kind of spread the word as far as the freedom movement. But I think that there is room also for political, if not like legislated solutions, at least mucking up the gears a little bit. So
and even just say with the Mises Caucus and our different approach to the political system. We can use the political system as a great educational and messaging tool, right? And that doesn't have to be in conflict with the political actions. It can be, we are spreading libertarianism. We are spreading a new way to think about what government's role is, if any, and we can point the way to localism. And say, I'm going to be on the national stage. I'm probably going to end up talking about FarmMatch, which will be a solution to these national problems that is outside of politics, but I can use a stage built by politics in order to actually free people's lives. It all can work together. And I think that's the way that the best things work. There's a synchronicity that makes it feel like destiny. Like, let's just go with it and see how far we can go.
Awesome. Well, so you're going to be in Reno. I'm going to be in Reno. If any of my listeners are going to be in Reno, make sure to come up, shake my hand, give Joseph a hug. That way we can kind of all build the community. That's I have been really struggling with the question of like what. So Michael Malice's kind of construction of what makes someone left or right is you ask the question, are some people better than others? And I've never been able to answer that question like objectively better. What does that even mean? Like better at what?
Yeah, right.
And I think so I was talking to somebody else and he was like, no, the better at what is what you're designed to ask there. Like that, I don't think he actually means some people are better like just at being human than others. And I don't really know, like maybe there is sort of a purpose of being human. And for me, the answer to that question, and you feel free to weigh in on this, because I've been asking a lot of the guests that question. I'm kind of honing in on, though, the answer to that question being building community. It's sort of what separates us from other species. Like, obviously wolves have packs and so on and so forth, but it doesn't really work in the same way that a human community works. Do you have anything to riff on as far as that goes from either anthroposophic or just Joseph Ecklund speaking off the top of his head?
It's interesting. I was just having a conversation with an interesting sounding left libertarian who is contacting me from the Radical Caucus. And we were talking a little bit about collectivism versus individualism. And they said that they were, somewhat in the middle about, collectivism versus individualism. And really what it is that collectivism, that in human collectivism, we can understand what a healthy versus what a sick collectivism is. And that is how it integrates with individuality. Because we're spiritual beings, it's not about the biology itself, where an ant colony or wolf pack is just for survival. We're actually about what is the good, what is our destinies as individuals, and how does that work together with the collective. A proper functioning family integrates the individualities and actually brings out the individual in a way that isolation or in surface level interactions they wouldn't be allowed to reveal themselves. It actually, through depth and connection, we become more, and it allows who we are to reveal itself more, even to ourselves in our experience. And so I think that this idea of community and collective it really has to do with, well, who are we as an individual and who are we as a community? What are we aiming at? What is our purpose on Earth? And you said, like, is a person better than another person? Is there one standard to say what makes a valuable human being? In some ways, yes, and in some ways, no, because humans are different. We know that humans are different right from when they're born. Like, different children act completely differently, even if you try and treat them the same. And so, having a certain purpose, you might be more or less able to go fulfill that. But in some ways, being a human being does have some universals. It does have some universals that say, like, if I am an honorable person, if I try to support my community, if I try to fulfill a purpose-driven life, that honor that fulfills certain, like, and I focus on the spiritual very much so, because they are truths that are eternal outside of the individual experience, and they're subtle, they're not physical. And these truths, goodness, truth, beauty, these sorts of things, if I can serve those, and Jordan Peterson, he talks about, how do I think about what's good? Well, I can think about what's good for me. I can think about what's good for my closest partner, my family, my community. I can focus on what's good for my nation or wider society and humanity at large. I can think about that, and then for my environment and everything else, I can think about that for what's good for that right now, tomorrow, long into the future. And as those stack up, it reveals something about what is good as far as my purposeful action. And some people are better at that.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, exactly. All right,
Wilson
awesome.
was bad at it. Wilson was terrible at it.
Quite possibly the worst person of the last 200 or so years, at least. Joseph, thank you so much for joining me. Why don't you drop whatever plugs you want to, and then we'll get out of here.
Yeah, man. Well, if you want to, I'm on Facebook. I kind of do Twitter passively. I like stuff. I'll be sharing my FarmMatch affiliate link when it's up, man, and I will share it with you, and I will help you do it as well. Give me a little bit of time. I've got to test this thing real thoroughly, and then I'll get it out there, and maybe we'll hook up again and we'll share it.
All right, sweet. Well, I'm going to put a link to farmmatch.com at the very least,
yes,
without the affiliate links.
And especially if there are any farmers out there, it's really true. Yeah. I want to bring more farmers on. Main things: don't use chemicals or antibiotics, and no GMOs. And then it's about the distribution. Do you manage your distribution yourself through drop locations or home delivery on a regular basis?
All right, sweet. Thank you so much, Joseph. I will see you in a couple of weeks in Reno. And until then, thanks.
Thank you.